MX team in pot 2, so a tough draw out of the gates, and I think the door is open for Tigres. They've won, they've lost in the final 3 of the last 4 years. You would say they're in the easier side of the bracket. No other Mexican team on their side of the bracket. The door is open for Tigres.
I'm happy. I mean, for my pick, I'm happy selfishly, but you have to remember though, teams 1, 3, 5, and 7 host the return leg come the quarterfinals. So that's something to think about as well. So right now, look at Atlanta United. You could have Atlanta United playing Club America, and they're hosting the second leg, a rematch of the Campeones Cup, and we just talked about that. That's a big fixture, but there's some games like Comunicaciones and Club America. Forget it. Chalk all day long. Give it to me, no problem. They can't go into the Azteca and win that match. And it doesn't matter what happens in the first matchup. Club America will come out of that. So you can almost assuredly push in them that match in the second round against Atlanta United in the quarterfinals. The key thing for Atlanta United is in my opinion, they're going to beat Motagua up. Because Motagua has a pretty good defensive unit, but offensively they can't put balls in the back of the net. Motagua, one of the only teams in the Concacaf League, they only allowed 1 goal at home, during that run. Doesn't matter what went on the road. So when you go to Motagua, can Atlanta United put in? Well, they've shown you already some of the pieces they put to the puzzle. Now they have a little bit more time between now and February to add some firepower to that arsenal. That's almost assuredly the matchup right now, America and Atlanta United.
A few other interesting notes. We're going to see a debutant definitely in the quarterfinals. New York City FC and AD San Carlos of Costa Rica, both in number 6. The winner of that will advance. They're both debutants. Impact and Saprissa, both veterans of this competition going back a long time. That should be a very even matchup. Cruz Azul, potentially, we assume they would beat Portmore United with all due respect to the Jamaicans. Could you see Cruz Azul against the winner of LAFC Club Leon? That looks like a very good quarterfinal matchup. And as you mentioned, a potential rematch, the Campeones Cup, Atlanta United and Club America, just about 6 months after Atlanta United beat Club America.
You've got a feel for LAFC a little bit, right? Their first Champions League, and this is what they run into, the juggernaut of Leon. I want to go back to 7-8 for a second again, because Seattle Sounders, Olympia, Montreal Impact, and Saprissa. We just said that Olympia was looking to get back to their winning ways. Doesn't have a title since 2015, 2016. Saprissa, a team that feels slighted a little bit, that they can make a run with the big boys. This is a really good opportunity because of the way that side of the bracket matches up. Again, that's going to be a coin flip with 7 and 8. No matter who gets through there, that's almost assuredly a guaranteed run into the semifinal matchup.
Well, now we welcome back to the set to Savants for CONCACAF. To my left, Arch Bell, and then John Arnold. We had you on in the pre-match show.
I like it.
You heard us waxing poetic about our takes on the draw. Give us your opinions.
First impression, very difficult for MLS teams. You have, was it Atlanta having to go down to Motagua, Seattle facing Olympia, New York City FC, San Carlos, my dark horse pick. So we'll see what happens there. And of course, LAFC facing Leon. So I think for a lot of these MLS teams, it's going to be a very, very difficult tournament.
When I look at the draw, I think that bottom half, if you want to say it like that, Tuca Ferretti has to be smiling wherever he is tonight, because that path, if America gets through, they're playing Atlanta United. You mentioned the Campeones Cup rematch. That's not going to be easy. Leon, they start right away against MLS competition. If you get through, it's potentially Cruz Azul. If you're Tigres and you get through, it's either NYCFC or San Carlos, debutants in this competition. And then if you get through again, it could be the Sounders, it could be Olympia, it could be Montreal Impact. I just think that side of the bracket is a little more friendly, perhaps, for your hopes of getting to the final.
Yeah, it feels like the top of the bracket, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are some of the heavyweights historically the last couple of years in CONCACAF. The other side of the brackets, 5, 6, 7, and 8, an opportunity for a dark horse apart from Tigres.
My question to you on this, can we call it the easy side? That's fair to say, right? Well, we'll call it the easy side. That 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the easy side.
Yeah.
There's no easy games, but compared to 1 to 4, this is a cakewalk to the other side, which is just the big boys coming to play and having fun with each other. Remove Tigres. Who's next up? Who's the favorite out of that?
I guess you'd have to say the Seattle Sounders,
yeah,
the reigning champion of MLS.
Seattle.
But even then, as Arch mentions, I mean, Olympia's my dark horse, so I'm going to stump for them a little bit. Not going to be easy trips. And as we mentioned on the pre-draw show, is the off-season, is the long time off going to help or hinder these MLS teams? Olympia just won a championship. They're going to be already ready for Concacaf League because they're qualified for that tournament. I think this is a team that's going to try and sort of counterbalance the absences that we'd mentioned, the losses they're going to have in the transfer window, and I think that could be a difficult game. But I think if you're going to take Tigres out of the equation, you have to look at the Sounders. Impact with a new coach, NYCFC not yet with a coach. I think that side, while it is easier perhaps to get to the final, the MLS clubs on that side have a lot of question marks for me.
And one note I wanted to make on Montreal and Saprissa, only one team from MLS has ever won against Saprissa at the Saprissa, and that was the Columbus Crew back in, I think it was like 2010, 2011. It was a long time ago.
Yep.
Sporting Kansas City, Portland Timbers, in recent years, they've all had a difficult time down there. And Saprissa, they've been paired up with like your Club America, with your Tigres lately, and in the last couple Concacaf Champions Leagues. They're going to be really motivated to play this Montreal Impact.
That's a good side with Johan Venegas, with Manfred Ugalde. I mean, that's a side with players, and they haven't kind of yet been, you mentioned rated. I think they've restocked after losing a lot of their players to MLS and other leagues. And so I do think Saprissa could be a difficult out for the Impact on that side.
Might I maybe caveat this a little bit? This is the better side of the bracket, 1, 2, 3, 4. But I think 5 to 8 might be the deeper one, top to bottom. I think the matchups are tighter. You have the MLS Cup champion in Seattle in there. You have Saprissa, a perennial Costa Rican power. Montreal is always good in this competition. Olympia is here every year. This will be their 11th or 12th time in this competition in the last 12 years. There's no Portmore United on this side. There's no Comunicaciones. With all due respect to some of these teams, you might say top to bottom. The other side of the bracket might be more even.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think this is a very competitive side. And remember, no team came closer. I guess you could say Tigres in the final against Monterrey, but Alianza pushed Monterrey very hard in that round of 16 last year. In the second half, they hit the post. And if that ball goes in, another inch or two closer, and they might have scored, and maybe they get that 1-1 draw in Monterrey in advance. So Alianza put forth an excellent performance against Monterrey a year ago. Could they do it again against another Monterrey side in Tigres? So yes, I think you're right. I think it's a very competitive half of the bracket.
Let's jump to that side. Let's jump to 1 to 4 though now, where maybe there is some mismatch. Where does Portmore have a chance? Anybody has a chance. It's that any given Sunday type thing. I mean, talent-wise, it's off the charts for Cruz Azul. Bob Bradley at home right now. Leon, what's he thinking?
I think he's thinking he got the short end of the stick. I mean, that's
that's
the draw that everyone wanted to
TV
avoid.
verbiage.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's the draw everyone wanted to avoid. You knew there was the possibility of the one Mexican team in Pot 2, Leon, being drawn against your side. And if you look at the draws for all the other MLS teams, you'd sign up for every single one of those before you sign up for Leon. That said, for us in the press, for the fans that are going to be attending the game at Bank of California Stadium and at Camp Nou, it's going to be fantastic. And look, these are the games that LA won, right? These are the games that they signed up for when they tried to win this tournament, when they had this historic MLS season. These are what we want to see. So I'm looking forward to that game for sure. I mean, for me, it's the standout tie, obviously, of the first round.
Think about the interviews, by the way. They talked about the progression of the club, and from day one, it was the fans, and everything has all pushed together that they want to be an international club. Now's your chance. Right? Now's your chance at a massive stage to go out and make a statement.
Yeah, and it should be a good atmosphere. JJ Macias, we don't know where he's going to be playing after the new year.
Yeah, some MLS talk, some rumors.
If it's with Leon, I mean, he's the star attraction. That should add something to that. But we should emphasize how good Leon has been. They're not really one of the big household names in Mexico. They haven't really won the Champions League. It's only their second appearance, but they finished first in the just completed Apertura. They finished second in the spring season, the Clausura. They haven't got it done in the playoffs, but over the 18-game tournament in Mexico, they've been the first or second best team over the last calendar year.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a team with a lot of quality, and it goes far beyond Macias. There's Luis Montes with his experience, everything that he brings. Ivan Rodriguez pushing to get a spot on the Mexican national team. The question is, I think, where does Macias go? Because they do need a forward to put in the goals, and they have some other attacking players who can do the job. And the question also for me is, can they do it in a knockout series? Because as you mentioned, they've had fantastic regular season tournaments, but we haven't seen Nacho Ambriza's side put it all together necessarily yet in a Liguilla situation. Now that they're in a Concacaf Champions League situation, very similar sort of tournament, you have to do well both away from home and at home. It could be difficult, and especially in an atmosphere at the Bank of California Stadium, although I am excited to see what the crowd shift is like, because there's a lot of people from Guanajuato that live in Southern California, that live in Arizona, that are absolutely going to be the first in line for tickets. I know the LAFC fans are strong too, so it's for me just a beautiful opportunity for both teams to prove something. I think it's going to be a really nice tie.
Arch, 1, 2, 3. Comunicaciones, Portmore United, Motagua. Who's got the best chance in your opinion?
Motagua,
Yeah.
by far.
Yeah.
With all due respect to Ricardo Gardner, who I spoke to before the draw, I think it's Motagua. Two excellent players, Mateus Gales, the midfielder, and Juan Pablo Montes, a ringer. Motagua's made the last two Concacaf League finals. Diego Vasquez, who actually just walked right past us, excellent coach. So going down to Honduras in that first leg is going to be very difficult for Atlanta United. So I think Motagua very capable of getting the results that they need to advance and eliminate Atlanta United.
Cruz Azul, Portmore United. We expect Cruz Azul to win that. Cruz Azul seems to be kind of prime for this competition. What makes them a semi-favorite?
Well, I think it's just the history that they have, having won the competition. Right now, they're in a bit of a remake. You know, we don't know exactly what Cruz Azul is going to look like. A new sporting director, new players coming in the off-season. They've been linked with all sorts of players, but the players they've been linked with are certainly the quality that we've come to expect from a team like Cruz Azul, who hasn't been able to get over the hump since the 90s in the league, but has had success on the international stage when you look at the Concacaf Champions League. So it's difficult to say who will be on the field, especially in a game like the one against Portmore United, but you'd have to think that with some of the names they've been linked with and some of the players that are already there and the veterans that they have, you know, Jesus Corona in goal, other players that have been around for quite some time, you have to think that they will be able to prove that quality and show what they can do. Portmore United, you know, you have to give them a chance, and I think it'll be difficult to play them away. And we've talked a lot about in the national level, international level, the rise of the Caribbean. We saw teams like Bermuda, Haiti make the Gold Cup semifinals, Curacao hang in League A. Will that success transition into the club game? We haven't seen it yet, but this is a chance for it to happen.
And one note on Cruz Azul, Club America is a 7-time CONCACAF club champion. Cruz Azul is a 6-time CONCACAF club champion. And it used to be Cruz Azul was top dog, stood atop the CONCACAF club title mountaintop. And when Club America won those back-to-back a couple of years ago, it became Club America. So Cruz Azul, there's also a little bit of motivation to tie Club America for the most decorated CONCACAF club team.
You also have stadium concerns. I think one interesting matchup there is New York City FC against AD San Carlos. San Carlos, they were in the second division 2 years ago. I think their stadium holds about 5,000. So
a lot of stadium questions in that pairing.
Where are they going to play? That's not uncommon in the Champions League. Oftentimes a larger stadium, New York City FC, might have schedule conflicts. More so in the later rounds than in February with Yankee Stadium, so that's a constant thing. But I think there's some really intriguing matchups. You have first meetings from teams debutants like NYCFC and San Carlos, and then some of the old guard teams like Montreal and Saprissa and Olympia and Seattle and others.
It's interesting you bring up the stadium question because those have affected teams in the past. We've seen in previous editions of the CONCACAF Champions League teams often in Central America not able to use their home stadium. Their fans, you know, the ones who make it, bless them, love the team, are able to spend the money, get the vacation, but usually that's a couple hundred instead of the thousands that would have been there had it been at their home stadium. So, you know, who knows how that will turn out. We'll see which facilities end up getting used. You hope it's a great environment, great atmosphere, but if one team's able to use their typical facility and the other one has to ask fans to take a bus ride or even fly in a plane, that could certainly be a factor in specifically that series and maybe a few others.
I think that's a good point with San Carlos. If they end up playing in the Estadio Nacional in San Jose, not quite the home advantage, even in the Alajuelense home stadium there. And so, yeah, that's an excellent point. And with New York City FC, who knows where they'll be? Yankee Stadium, City Field,
possibly.
The old Shea Stadium, who knows?
Domestically, we see that for a lot of MLS teams when they deal with the U.S. Open Cup. They don't necessarily get to play at their home venue,
That's
and
true.
And it has affected them. So kind of the two of them combining. I want to jump back to Tigres for a second because I've made it very clear that they're my pick to get to the final and win it. I've given my reasons why.
To win it.
Here's my question. Tuca Ferretti. Consistent. Matt asked me, he said, are they too veteran? Are they too old? My question to you is, Gignac didn't play till the final last year.
Correct.
He's the only one scoring this year. Luis Quinones has put a couple in the back of the net. If Gignac does not play, does this fall asleep and they turn their head a little bit? Because to be fair, in league play, they haven't necessarily been turning heads. Versus the big boys, they've gotten some good results, but they've dropped a couple games that they should have put in them, easily put in their back pocket. Do they fall asleep here and get picked off early?
It's interesting because Tigres has a pretty good academy. They have a really talented sub-20 team, A lot of those guys don't get opportunities except when Tuca Ferretti decides, I'm going to roll out with a young guy. It depends on, I think, a couple injury situations, but you have to think that after so long trying to find an international title, that Tigres are going to really want to get over the top this time. But we've seen Tuca Ferretti not use necessarily his strongest side until the very last moment. So I think it's just going to depend on which squad he rolls with. I still like them in that first round tie, even if Ferretti uses an alternate lineup. But I think if they want to win, they probably need to get in a better rhythm than they did last time around, using teams without Gignac and without other regulars.
We're going to get an opportunity to interview a couple gentlemen. One quick question for you as we bring Lagerwey on right now from the Seattle Sounders. Are you guys happy with the draw?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always happy to see the draw, what it produces, and especially when you can get like a first-time meeting, and then sometimes some renewing acquaintances like a Seattle Olympia, from two very good group stage encounters from several years ago. So it's always fun to see how these teams are paired and how it all falls.
Garth Lagerwey's here. Thanks for coming back. The draw has happened. We've analyzed it. Give us your initial takeaways.
I think you can read too much in these things sometimes. I mean, everybody's got to play the good teams, the bad teams, whatever your perception is at some point. So I think certain teams might have an easier start than others. But we were just chatting about it with the LAFC guys. They have arguably the hardest draw with Leon in the first round. But at the same time, if you look at MLS and what's happened to Toronto in 18 and what happened to Kansas City in 19, you go all in that game, and if you win the game, maybe you have a chance to win the tournament. And if you lose, at least you're out. So, I think there's you can look at anything any way you want, and at the end of the day, you're gonna have to beat some very good teams to win the tournament.
Garth, I have a question in terms of education. I'll make it relevant. And we just talked about the U.S. Open Cup. When you get the Open Cup draws, you don't necessarily have a lot of time to prepare. Nope. It's not, this is a different story. Number one, walking in here, how familiar is your organization with these squads? Fairly.
I mean, Olympia, as you noted, we played Olympia just 2015 in terms of in-group play. Montreal, we obviously see all the time, and Saprissa is a club that, most of us scout. If you talk about leagues that are very familiar to us, Costa Rica is probably the most prominent Central American league. So at least the players, the personnel, those are going to be very familiar as well. So, for a club like ours, I think it's our 6th Champions League. So we've seen, again, every possible iteration of this tournament. And I think for us, it's about coming out, being ready, and trying to come out of the gate strong and having a good team from the get-go. And then, again, whoever we play, hopefully we can beat them over 2 legs.
You mentioned the familiarity that you have with the competition. Can you take us through what it's like from the perspective of a team executive in that room when the ball is being drawn in that thing? Are there nerves? Are there hopes? What kind of goes through your mind when you're sitting there watching the whole spectacle?
Don't smile inappropriately. No, and here's what I mean, right? Because you go in and you say, if you're looking at this draw in a big picture, you say, maybe Leon's the most difficult opponent to draw. So if you draw someone other than them, all of a sudden you smile, you break out, you relieve. But the reality is there's no easy games. I mean, we played at Olympia, again, just 3 years ago, and it's an incredible stadium down there in Tegucigalpa, and, it's a really difficult opponent, and, you're going to get put away really quickly if you don't take these things seriously, especially for us starting preseason just January 11, only having a couple weeks to prepare. So, again, I think a lot of this is just a perception. And it's one thing where I do think our club, we're an experienced team. We've been in 3 of the last 4 MLS Cups, won 2 of them. We've been in this tournament a number of times, 3 times in the last 5 years now. So I think our players are familiar with our opponents. I think they're familiar with the tournament. They have big game experience. I think those are the kinds of things that can help us. But in that draw, you got to remember that just like in the games, the executives, we have no control over what's happening there. Just relax and enjoy the show.
Garth, you mentioned preseason. Correct me if I'm wrong, the team is going to Mexico as part of the preseason. Is that right?
We're looking into that. Yeah, and it's something that we would like to do. There's still logistics that we have to lay out, but certainly, I think Toronto laid the blueprint for that again, going back to 2018 and the success they had training at altitude, preparing to play teams at altitude. It's interesting when you see our draw. Potentially no Mexican opponent until a semifinal if we're fortunate enough to get through Olympia and some of the others. Maybe that altitude preparation becomes less important because you would see that game probably in mid-April as opposed to in late February. So again, I'm sure my timing's off there a little bit, but my point is it's a longer runway. So
1 and 1 is 4. I don't deal with math. I thought we're good there. So question, Matt brought it up to you earlier. We talked about the youth and the opportunity for them to maybe get some positive exposure a bit more. Does this affect that?
I don't think so. I don't think it has a lot to say because you're going to play the same number of games. I mean, if anything, again, the Olympia doesn't get any easier or harder based on how many young players you play.
Yep.
I think we're going to play our experienced group by and large in the Champions League. We're going to respect our opponents that way, and we're going to have to make do with what we can in MLS. And it's always an interesting conundrum, right? Because we've announced our home opener against Chicago Fire, and our fans are going to want to come out and celebrate the championship we just won. And we were in this position 2 years ago, and we played LAFC in their first ever game, and it was a ton of hype. And we actually outshot them. People forget that, but played a mixed group and lost the game, and were immediately condemned for having misprioritized everything. So the good news is you can't win. So you have, but we're going to put a strong team out for Champions League. I do think we're going to use some of our young players, in these first couple months of the season. In particular, hopefully that they sink and they don't. Hopefully they swim and they don't sink, and they're able to help us and build depth in our squad.
Hey Garth, in your opinion and in conversations with the other teams from MLS, do you think the new schedule helps you guys in this competition, ending MLS a month earlier, maybe more rest, maybe more time to scout and rebuild your rosters? Do you think this is an advantage now for MLS ending a month earlier?
I do. I think it's probably balanced out by not having a CBA. But having literally done this twice on 6 weeks from playing the final to opening match,
Sure.
That's almost impossible. I mean, and we did it 2 years in a row, and by the third year we were just absolutely shattered. So yes, having 9 weeks instead of 6 weeks, that definitely helps. It allows our boys to get some rest and be better prepared. But again, as we talked about in the pre-draw show, not having a CBA, not understanding what the payroll is going to be, not understanding what you can spend, that is going to put a little bit of a damper, I think, on some of the investments you're able to make proactively.
Want to have a little fun?
We
got you here. Might as well take advantage of it. Let's stay on your side of the bracket.
All right.
Just pick my winners for me.
Oh man, you're gonna put me on the spot.
Why not?
here.
Let's have a
wow.
little fun. Numbers. You guys have obviously moved on. Are you going to pay the Impact or Sapisa?
This is just a matter of who you're gonna upset now. So, I sat. Look, I'll give it away. I sat for the draw with the Montreal Impact people and with the NYCFC people. So I'm gonna pick both of them to go through. I'm more familiar
You're
with
making
them.
headlines in Central America.
Yeah. And again, when I was with RSL back in the day, we had an epic series against Saprissa.
Yes,
and
semifinal.
Semifinal matchup, and it's funny that the gentleman who I met back in 2011 there was still Saprissa's representative here. So, it was cool to renew acquaintances with him, and he remembered me, and I remembered him, and it was just this cool moment. And for those of you who know the old Saprissa Stadium, too, I mean, literally the roof would shake in the locker room when the fans would bounce and stuff. So, again, not writing them off, not disrespecting them, but I'm going to support my MLS colleagues and hope for the best in terms of them advancing in the tournament.
And to be clear, you picked Alianza.
The other guy, and I'm not making this up, it sounds like him, on my right shoulder, on the other side, because Montreal and New York City here, Tigres was right on this shoulder. So I'm just picking down the row. We're just going 1, 2, 3, 4, Montreal, New York, Seattle, Tigres coming out of the bracket. We'll see what happens.
Garth, what is it like going down to those games in Central America, especially when you all went down to Santa Tecla 2 years ago for that game? I mean, what is it like just, for the club, for the team, and just and everything, just the match itself, being in that type of atmosphere?
Well, look, in the case of Olympia, it's a really good stadium, and it's a really good fan base, and there's going to be a lot of support there, and it's going to be a difficult place to play. With Santa Tecla, we had some different challenges because the playing surface wasn't the best.
That's true.
Jordan Morris wound up tearing his ACL.
Yes, he did.
Not saying solely because of the field, but it didn't help. And so you face challenges like that from a logistical standpoint, things like that. It's going to be a good field when we play Olympia, so that part's okay. But we're going to have a more hostile environment in terms of the crowd. So it's always something that you have to deal with and figure out, and logistics but again, we've been there before, so hopefully that equips us to kind of be ready for anything.
Garth, thanks for your time. We got Larry Friedman from LAFC waiting in the wings, so we'll bug him now and we'll let Devin put him on the spot.
Awesome. Do it, man.
Best of luck.
Good to see you guys.
Thanks, Garth.
Thank you, Garth.
Well,
Should be joined by...
interesting side of the draw, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to get everybody's perception of what could or could not be. I thought it was kind of fun of him to, I'll support my MLS colleagues, right? He said that's what we're going to go with, and he was happy with. I respect that. I don't know if that's going to happen, though. I agree with you.
And he made an interesting point on the CBA as well, how that could play an effect, and when if there is an MLS strike and everything. So there's a lot of different things to take into account as we head, and as January is on the horizon.
It's interesting as well to hear about those relationships that are developed between some of these familiar faces in CONCACAF. We talk about these teams that we've seen face each other. These guys maybe they're not wishing each other success on the field, but off the field, I think they're generally rooting for each other, shaking hands, laughing about, things that happened last year. It's always fun to hear those stories that happen at this kind of event.
It's funny, a week ago, we read reports out of Seattle media that Seattle, I should say, was going to kind of be cautious in this competition, not go all in, balance the regular season. I think after this draw, we're going to see them maybe go for it a little bit more. It's not an easy draw, but as he said, they have an opportunity to go to the semifinals and not face a Liga MX team till the semifinals, potentially Tigres. So we'll see how it shakes out. They seem to kind of go after it, but it's funny how the tune can change just a little bit once the draw is out.
I still want to see if they stay true to the testament in terms of youth and how much they try and stoke that fire a little bit, because that organization has proven, not saying they are the best, but they've proven that they can funnel some quality talent through their system. Do they now continue to do it? Because that is a favorable draw. It's still a lot to ask, but that bottom 7-8, that's a look where, as he said, they could easily find themselves in the semifinals like that. And yes, it might be against Tigres, but you can give these guys, again, it's a business, and you can give these guys some real repetitions at an international level. Push comes to shove, I still find it a hard time. I mean, are you going to throw Afonso Ocampo-Champez in the next time? And that's very difficult to see. One or two, maybe, but you start talking about playing your youth. They're not going to put 5, 6, 20-year-olds out there.
I do think one thing that is helping that push, if that's kind of this tack that teams want to take, are these competitions like the Concacaf U13 Champions League, Liga MX and MLS facing each other at Generation Adidas Cup. They do have that sort of feeling and international experience, so I think that's something where maybe you feel a little more comfortable, but you're not going to put 5 or 6 in the 11.
Well, now we're getting an opportunity. Executive Vice President and Chief Business Officer Leif Friedman, LAFC, is back with us. Sir?
How you doing?
All the time. There's a little present for you.
I've been missing you guys.
Water's warm. Come on in.
Yeah.
So, how do we feel?
We feel great. This is super exciting. If the reaction to the announcement a few weeks ago that MLS All-Star in Los Angeles this summer was going to be Liga MX and MLS, the fact that our first match in this tournament is with a Liga MX club, I think it's pretty exciting.
Executive of the Year in Major League Soccer. Congratulations on that.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
And this is a real hypothetical, and you have a great home field advantage at Bank of California Stadium. But let's say it was a semifinal or a final. Would you ever consider going to the Rose Bowl or Memorial Coliseum, to a bigger venue to accommodate more of your fans? Or are you saying we're not leaving Bank of California Stadium for any game?
We consider the bank our home. John, Bob, the technical staff, the players, they like to play at home. They like to have our fan base in the house. For those of you who've been there, you know what it's like when the 32-52 gets rolling, and they get rolling before kick and they keep rolling after kick. It would take a lot for us to give that up, and I think, as I mentioned to you guys when we spoke a little bit earlier, we're here to win, and if home field advantage gives us an advantage, we're playing at home.
Talk about being excited for this matchup for us, and the media were saying, ooh, looks like the draw you didn't want. But on the other hand, it's a game that it seems like there's a fair amount of LAFC fans in LA and also a fair amount of Liga MX fans in LA. It's a game that should be a pretty great environment. What do you kind of expect from maybe that first Concacaf Champions League in the bank's history?
I think it might be up there with the derby games with our friends in Carson the Galaxy, where there's that kind of electricity in the building, where there's no mistaking from the minute when you walk in the door on match day that something big is going to happen. So, it's impossible for us to say what were we hoping? I was hoping to go to Jamaica, if I'm being honest, but that had nothing to do with the opponent. But, this is just super exciting and an incredible opportunity for us, the first time we play in an international match where the result matters.
And to boot against a Mexican club like Leon, this is only their second appearance in the Concacaf Champions League. Obviously, the first for LAFC. Is his experience a big deal? Do you think that it's what's the type of thing you can just kind of put to the side, knowing that you have such a strong squad, or is there a little bit of a trepidation knowing that this is a debutante year for LAFC in the tournament?
Well, I like to think that with a coach that has managed all over the world at the highest levels in both league and international competitions. The makeup of our roster with national team players, I don't think the first time is a problem, and I would say our inaugural season stands to prove that point.
Well, thanks so much. Congratulations
pleasure.
on
Thank
the
you.
award and this. And we're going to welcome Tom Marshall from ESPN and one more. But thanks so much for your time. Matchup between LAFC and Leon in the opening rounds.
I can tell you what I want to know. I want to know how quickly did his phone get a little text from Bob Bradley going, oh boy, oh boy.
Also going to be an easy game to sell, as we talked about. There's no way that the stadium isn't full. It's going to be a night to remember, I think, for fans of the Concacaf Champions League. That atmosphere is going to be incredible. We've seen LAFC games sold out for MLS. Now they have a chance to sell the place out for Concacaf Champions League, and I think it will be a pretty good traveling support for Leon as well.
Yeah, interesting draw. So, sir, how are we doing?
Not too bad yourselves.
Let's dive right into it. Interesting draw. Initial reaction, just right off the bat.
LAFC against Leon.
Yeah,
I mean, I think, you know, a club like LAFC and the impact that they've had on MLS since they've come into the league, and then all of a sudden the first game on an international level they get Club Leon, who have had, for me, possibly the best team in Liga MX in 2019. No team has won more games than Club Leon this year, so it's a tough game and a tough way to start CONCACAF Champions League action for LAFC.
And let me sort out our introductions as we do things on the fly. This is Kevin Gilmore with the Montreal Impact. Had a little mix-up in the pre-match show. Sorry about that.
No worries.
All well intended. Tom Marshall from
You can blame him.
ESPN
It's okay.
has been based in Guadalajara and now Mexico City for several years covering Liga MX. So we have a mix of club president and journalist and broadcaster here on the set. So give us your take on the draw and the first matchups.
Yeah, listen, we with the A8 position kind of makes it tough for us if we get past the first round going to the quarters. But Saprissa is a good team, a very good team. So it's going to be it's a tough first draw for us. Having said that, if you look at the bracket, we don't face any Mexican clubs until the semifinals. So that makes it a little more. You got to take the good with the bad. We go into Costa Rica. We've played there before. We've won there, not against Saprissa. But in fact, last time we played there, we won and advanced to the Champions League final in 2015. So we're familiar with the stadium, we're familiar with the city, and looking forward to it.
I'm curious in terms of preparation. A difficult answer because we already talked about your coach coming in, Thierry Henry, how you're going to positively surround his staff. With this draw, how far down will you guys start to prep? Is it as simple as I know coaches that are, I'm prepping for the next 90 minutes, let's see what the result is, and then we'll go. I know guys that will look 5 fixtures down and have the backroom staff working. What does this look like on your end?
Listen, I'm not going to speak for Thierry, but we're going to start discussing this. I'm sure the sporting side is going to start discussing this as early as this week, as we get ready for training and understanding that you come in MLS season, you've got the Champions League and also the Canadian Championship that starts in July. It's a heavy load, and so a part of the planning is not just looking at your opponent and the bracket, but it's also understanding the MLS games and how the schedule shakes out. Because it makes for a very, very difficult first half of the season.
I have a question in terms of the organization itself. Amazing that you have the opportunity. Matt asked me, he said, about the teams here. I said, these are the champions of champions. You guys won the Canadian Championship. Did it reach a certain point in time in the season based upon the variables you were dealing with, where you kind of threw all your eggs into that basket to go after that?
You know what? We said when we made the coaching change late in the season, we gave ourselves 2 objectives when Wilmer Cabrera came in. One was making the playoffs, and the other one was winning the Canadian Championship. And we didn't manage to hit on both, but we won the Canadian Championship, which was a silver lining in an otherwise difficult season. We had a tough season this year with our key player Nacho being out for a good spell, and obviously not having our best lineup out there. But ideally we would have made the playoffs and advanced to Champions League by winning the Canadian Championship. We got 1 out of 2, and we're looking forward to it.
Health was something that Matt and I talked about. If your squad gets healthy and gets an outside back, you guys fly and can do amazing things. For the structure, the format, Toronto FC, if they win the MLS Cup this year, they don't get into this tournament. Do you agree with that?
Well, listen, I think it would be odd to have a TFC win MLS Cup and not advance. So it's an issue that CONCACAF will have to look at and see how they deal with this. Understanding that you've got more and more leagues in North America and Central America where teams are starting to take their place, and the key here is to have the best clubs in a tournament that allows them to battle for the CONCACAF Champions League. So I think it didn't happen that way, but had it happened that way, it would have been an odd circumstance.
So Tom, and Kevin can understand this as the Montreal Impact president, but you really focus on Liga MX, so maybe some scouting report, if you will, for the audience and for us. Give us a rundown of the Liga MX teams in this competition.
I mean, among the best. I mean, there's no the way this is structured now with the finalists of both seasons going forward. I mean, you go through the list, Club America. At the end of the year, they're playing another final. The amount of spending power that club has. Same with Cruz Azul. Club Leon, like I was just saying then, probably the best 2019 of any Liga MX team, certainly in terms of points won. And then, I think the good thing for Montreal is you look at the second half of the draw, there's only one team in it. And for me, it's probably the most fascinating Liga MX team. Because Tigres, on paper, they've been the team of the decade. That's the kind of label that they've had here in Mexico. But there's so much pressure on Tigres to win this tournament. I mean, there's an unbelievable amount of pressure. Monterrey right now, the big local rivals, are over in Qatar playing the Club World Cup. Tigres fans hate that. They are absolutely desperate to win this tournament. And although on paper, from the Tigres point of view, it does look like a kind draw, the pressure's on there, and there's three MLS clubs on that side as well. So the pressure's on for me for Tigres.
Matt making an interesting little thought about this, and I agree with you, by the way, but we were talking about how the right side, 5, 6, 7, 8, might have been the kind draw, if you will, because you have so many big names over here, but top to bottom, that this was probably stacked a bit better because Lagarde said Motagua could take on Atlanta United. Not disagreeing with that, but Comunicaciones, Pomor United, you can almost X them out, that they don't have a chance. Do you agree that the right side is a bit more well-rounded?
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, I think if you're looking for a path to the final, you don't want Atlanta's. You know what I mean?
Of course.
You don't want Atlanta, and then all of a sudden Club America, and then potentially Leon, LAFC, or Cruz Azul. So I definitely think it's more accessible the second half. But like Kevin knows, you guys have been in this competition a lot of times. You start in mid-February, you go down to Costa Rica, Saprissa, a massive club. That's not an easy game, and the same with Seattle there as well. So yeah, it's never easy in this tournament. I think people underestimate that sometimes.
Kevin, from a player recruitment perspective, how much does this Champions League help for a guy like Thierry Henry and your sporting staff having this carrot of getting players to Montreal to play against the best teams in the region?
Yeah, listen, I think that in the near term, the fact that we're playing in the Champions League in a few months isn't going to change much. I think from a player recruiting standpoint, what does change things is with Olivier Renard, who's got a proven track record in Belgium of finding good young players, putting them in a setting and a structure that allows them to succeed, and has had success with his clubs, coupled with Thierry Henry, who brings with him tremendous wealth, experience, knowledge, and a willingness, as he's proven throughout his career, to work with young players. I think those are the things that make us a club of choice. The Champions League is something that adds to that, but in the near term, I don't know how much effect that'll have. Long term, Thierry and Olivier, and our ability to basically play in these types of tournaments and take our place is what's going to have an impact on our ability to bring in good young players.
Tom, give us the matchup you're most excited about in the first round, and who from Liga MX you think will go deepest this term.
It's tough. There's a lot of good matches. I think you can't look beyond the LAFC Leon. I mean, it's just for a club, for what LAFC has done in MLS, and now to go and play a club like Leon. I'm sure there's a lot of people from Guanajuato that live in the LA area, and so I'm sure they'll be absolutely desperate for tickets. But yeah, I was actually going to make a point there that I think in Mexico there's actually a feeling that they want to play Montreal for the specific reason you get Thierry Henry coming into town. And I think you imagine Henry coming into the Azteca, for example. I think people are quite excited about that, but looks like it'll be Tigres in the semi-final if it is going to happen.
We'll try to work our way there.
Guys might not get out. We were bringing him in here. He might not get out. We're all fans, and I want to pick your brain because we take a look here. Is there, outside of your matchup and the work that you guys have to do, is there something you look at? Forget the LAFC Leon. Is there something you look at and go, ooh, That tickles my fancy a bit.
Well, you took out the one that I was going to talk about because I think it's obvious. LAFC Leon.
Yeah.
I think that stadium. I was talking about this with Larry. That stadium is just going to be jam-packed for that game. It's going to be such a sought-after match, both in terms of, like you said, a great Liga MX team right now, and LAFC, what they've done. So I know you didn't want me to talk about that matchup.
No,
but I think
you're
that's
good.
the one that clearly stands out.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's the fun one. Look at this shiny penny, because I agree.
Yep.
That's not even a penny. That's a $50 that's from the 1950s that everybody wants. People want to go to that.
Kevin Gilmore with Montreal Impact, Tom Marshall with ESPN. Thank you both for your time. It's time for us to wrap
Thanks
it
for
up.
having
We've been
us.
on for 3 hours pregame, probably close to an hour postgame. I want to thank everyone that made this broadcast possible, everyone in the truck, everyone in the video rooms, and of course you at home watching. So for Devin Kerr, Matt Peterson, our entire crew, and all of our guests, good night from Mexico City. This concludes the post show after the 2020 Scotiabank Concacaf Champions League draw.
Ha!